When you get close to your subject, the first problem you'll face is your own shadow falling onto your subject, and that is aggravating. So a shiny reflector allows you to move to the side, avoiding a shadow. A silver reflector will bounce about 90% of the light, and it creates a very well lit shot. This collapsible reflector was $50. This guy's over the top, though. I mean, if I just wanted a picture of a flower, I just get on my belly, speed up my shutter, and take the shot. I might put a piece of paper behind the subject to get rid of a busy background, but I don't think I'd be taking pictures of flowers with a tripod. This is my approach. The best way to avoid your own shadow is to position yourself so the sun is coming from the side or from behind your subject. And this creates dramatic lighting by letting light pass through the leaves or the blossoms. You'll need to reflect light back into the subject to fill in the dark areas. And this setup yields very good results. I'm using a foil turkey pan that cost $1 at the dollar store, and that is a really good reflector for close-up shots. See, I'm standing in the shade of a tree and shooting into the backlighted leaves, and that's a good strategy. Note the placement of the reflector. It's used to light the dark edge of the leaf, which would normally have gone black without it. So very common subjects can become interesting if the composition uses diagonals. We've talked about that in earlier sessions. So using a foil turkey pan adds a unique sparkle to the surface of plants. And at this point, I also recommend that you have a water bottle with you, and you can sprinkle some water droplets onto close-ups of plants. That really adds a lot. It would have helped this shot. And you can see how it's working here. So nature photographers 30 years ago, everybody used to have a spray bottle with them. They'd have one with glycerin and one with water, but people seem to have forgotten this trick. I'd keep it in mind. It looks really good. It looks good on food shots too. You're photographing an apple or something, you really want it to have water droplets on it. There are many quick solutions for controlling direct sunlight to achieve less contrast. The diffusion accessory shown here is a 42-inch diameter disc, and it's available for about $30. You can get these really inexpensive. They're just called diffusion filters, or you can buy a reflector, and it will have it'll be a diffusion disc, but it'll have a jacket that zips around it, and so you'll have four choices. You'll have usually silver, black, gold, and white, because the jacket can be turned inside out. So you can see the difference in just that little daisy by diffusing the light. Bright sunlight without any diffusion causes highlights on light subjects, and they typically burn up. So this pod it's lit in the upper shot, and there's a distracting element in the background. Altogether, that shot just really isn't all that great. So it's easily controlled with a plastic jug used as a diffuser, and I've gotten rid of that object in the background. Another way to get fill light into the scene is by shooting through a hole in a piece of white foam core. And this is a really terrific way. These shots were taken with a D300 Nikon and inexpensive macro lens, very old macro lens I bought on eBay for $100. The reflector is resting on the lens barrel, and it allows me to use two hands to control the camera. You can tape foil onto the surface of your reflector for more sparkle. How this works is the sunlight is pointing at me, and it's hitting that reflector, and then I'm bouncing it back into the subject. And so it's real easy to get great lighting, and you get a rim light around the subject like that bee shot there. Serious macro nature shooters, they use dedicated macro lens and a flash ring. Those are the most logical equipment purchases. A macro lens with autofocus will help you lock onto bugs and small objects, and the ring flash will light them in a millisecond, and they'll freeze any kind of motion. like that bee on the right. So I'm using my camera's up on the right. It's a Nikon 105 macro lens. I've got that for $120 used. It's a totally manual lens. That ring light screws right onto the front of the lens and you hook it up to your flash shoe. One of the problems that you'll have if you're using a flash is that you can only synchronize that flash up to a 200th of a second. So you could use anything like a 200th of a second or less with the flash. This shot was taken at 1,000th of a second, so the flash did not sync properly with the shutter, and only part of the image received the flash at the top. And that's because the shutter is a curtain shutter, and it's not exposing the entire sensor at fast shutter speeds. So yeah, you got to use 200th or less when you use any kind of flash with your camera. So indoor macro setups for jewelry, scientific studies, and fun they're a lot easier than you would think, but it does take a little getting used to. I did a ton of work for jewelers and stuff. That was that little jellyfish thing it's all made out of plastic, the entire thing, and it has a little light in the base. There's a guy in Santa Cruz that makes those. They're just beautiful. It's a totally secret operation. I have no idea how he does it. But I photograph tons of them for him every year because every one is different. Then that eye shot, you can see me in the reflection of the eye. So here is a real inexpensive way to go. I'm achieving professional results with a detergent jug and an off-camera flash, and it's simple and it's effective. I shoot items on my dinner table or in the backyard, and this method has served me well for large catalog jobs and also for nature studies. So my wife Lauren is shown here cataloging the jewelry items and frame numbers as I photograph them, and we can get through about 200 items in 3 hours. So standing on that tripod, that light stand on the far left, is a very inexpensive $39 electronic flash, and it's got a radio trigger. And then on my camera I have the radio send unit, and I'm shooting through that jug, and so I have the flash is just hitting the jug, and you can see on the left up there is a typical ring shot. So we can really bang through a lot of jewelry. There are 4 main common setups for doing macro shots of tiny objects such as jewelry, and once you have a diffuser and a light source in place, you can quickly switch these setups. So extreme close-up shots done with the setups in the previous slide look like this. Close-up macro and food shooting employ very similar lighting scheme. So I'm shooting a bowl of noodles or something there, and I'm using a light that is going through a diffuser. It's just to the right of the camera, and then the main light, what's called the key light, is above and behind the subject. And so that works very well for close-ups of food. The main light is above and behind the subject, and it puts a nice rim light on food. These are shots that I set up that I did with this setup with just one light off camera. I also have the room lights on. And these are getting your fruit or vegetables really wet, and you can use oil too. Doesn't have to be just water, and it really makes things juicy. Notice that I'm also using that panel light, and I'm shining it onto the griddle and the pancakes at an incident angle from my camera. So in other words, I'm looking into the subject, which is the pancake, and I'm seeing a direct reflection of that light. Those little panel lights are particularly good for close-ups, especially when you use them from the side. And also very small flashlights work very, very well. And so I have that panel light off to the left and behind, and all those little water droplets from the steam are backlit, and they're against a dark background. That's why you can see them. If I shot this with a flash, you wouldn't have seen any of that steam. You have to backlight if you want steam to show up, and you can actually see the water particles in the background. You got to have a dark background for this. Oh, there, that's even closer. So, and you got to use about 125th of a second or faster. I like to see a little blurring in the steam, actually. So 125th of a second works really well. Here's a super close-up. Food, if you're photographing close-ups of food, it has to be moist to look tasty. So this this tort, I brushed it with clear sugar syrup. These liquid highlights from oil or water, that sparkle comes from the incident angle of the key light. We're looking at a reflection of the key light in our subject. And this is how it works here is, let's say that your camera is off to the right and the light is approaching from the very left. So the angle A, the angle of incidence, bounces off the subject, and it always will be equal to the angle of reflection. Angle of incidence equals angle of reflection. So that's how you set up that light on the left and your camera on the right. Any billiard player knows this by heart because that's how they calculate the shots. And highlights from an incident angle key light really make this meat juicy. Of course, I coated it with oil first.